For 36 years, an entire town believed a lie. They held vigils. They said prayers. They convinced themselves a 17-year-old boy drowned at Alum Creek and was never found. But one photograph, buried in a dusty storage unit, hidden inside a box marked only with 3 letters, just shattered everything. Because that photo shows Paul Renner standing at the water's edge, alive, at 7:46 p.m. on the exact night he supposedly died. Someone took that picture. Someone watched him. Someone lied. And what happened next? It's darker than anything Brookdale, Ohio ever imagined. Before we dive into this, I need to know, where are you watching from right now? Drop your city and state in the comments. I want to see how far this story is reaching because honestly, Paul's story deserves to be heard everywhere. And look, if you believe victims deserve answers, if you believe cold cases shouldn't stay buried just because the truth is uncomfortable, then do me one favor, hit that subscribe button right now. We're pushing toward 1,000 subscribers, and every single one of you who joins this community. You're not just watching a video. You're standing on the side of the families who waited decades for justice. The people who buried this truth. They were counting on the world forgetting. Let's prove them wrong. All right, let's get into how this photo was found. The story begins in a cramped evidence room in Columbus. A deputy is sorting through boxes pulled from a seized storage unit in Dayton. Most of it is junk, rusted camping gear, cracked coolers, yellowing magazines from the Reagan era. Nothing worth a second glance. Then he reaches one box that's different. The tape is layered thick, like someone sealed it more than once. The marker on the side is faded, but 3 letters refuse to disappear, R88. He cuts it open. Inside, he finds maps, folded with care, creased from years of handling. Each one is marked with red circles around the Alum Creek area. Beneath them sits a stack of old papers and 4 rolls of undeveloped 35mm film. No labels. No case number. No explanation for why someone protected these items like they held a secret worth hiding. The deputy sends one roll to the small photo lab down the hall. Film this old usually turns to fog. He expects nothing. But when the technician slides the first image into view, the entire room goes silent. A teenage boy stands alone at the lake. Shoes beside him. Shirt in his hand. Dusk settling across the water behind him. He looks steady, calm, like someone trying to figure out what he just walked into. The face matches Paul Renner. The timestamp reads, July 18, 1988, 7:46 p.m. That's the exact date he disappeared. Here's the problem. According to the official file, Paul was already believed dead by that hour. The town accepted it. His school held a memorial. His family lived with a wound that never closed. But this image, this quiet, unexpected frame, tells a completely different story. To understand what this means, you need to understand who Paul Renner actually was. Brookdale in the late 80s felt untouchable. Kids rode bikes across long blocks without checking the time. Parents worked on cars in driveways while the radio played through open garage doors. People trusted the rhythm of their days. Paul fit that rhythm perfectly. 17 years old. Hard-working. Steady. Not the type to run off. Definitely not the type to vanish into thin air. On the morning of July 18th, he told his parents he was heading to Alum Creek to meet some friends. By late afternoon, his blue Oldsmobile was found abandoned at a rest stop off I-71. Driver's door open. Key still in the ignition. No struggle. No witness. No sign of him. For 3 decades, That was the story. But this photo changes everything. Because it proves one truth the original file never admitted: Paul Renner didn't disappear at that rest stop. He left that lake alive. The summer Paul vanished, Brookdale felt like the kind of place where nothing bad could happen. Houses lined up in neat rows. Kids played kickball in the street until someone's dad hollered for dinner. Lawns got trimmed the same way every Saturday morning. People believed they understood their little corner of the world. On July 18, 1988, that belief cracked wide open. Paul left home around noon. It was hot enough for the pavement to go soft under your shoes. His mother, Linda, handed him a small cooler with 2 sodas inside. "Stay hydrated," she told him. He laughed. Said he would. That was the last moment she ever heard his voice. Paul drove toward Alum Creek, a place he'd been visiting since he was a kid. He loved the trail that ran along the water and the quiet corners near the rocks where you could actually hear yourself think. He planned to meet 2 friends there, but they never showed. Later, they said they lost track of time and didn't make the drive. That detail still raises questions today. By late afternoon, the creek was busy. Families grilled near the picnic tables. Fishermen lined the shore. A few teenagers swam past the rope line, pushing their luck like teenagers do. Nothing seemed strange. Nobody reported hearing a call for help. Nobody noticed anything wrong. Somewhere inside that ordinary summer day, Paul reached a point no one could explain. Here's what the timeline tells us: 6:12 p.m., a jogger on the North Trail remembers seeing a blue Oldsmobile heading toward the rest stop off I-71. She didn't think twice about it. 7:11 p.m., a couple driving home from dinner spots the same car, parked slightly crooked, driver's door hanging open. They assume the owner stepped out to stretch his legs. 7:30 p.m., another driver notices the keys still sitting in the ignition. Figures someone will be back any second. 8:40 p.m., a trucker radios in an abandoned vehicle. When deputies arrived, something felt off immediately. The seat was pushed way too far back for someone Paul's height. The cooler his mom packed? Still sitting untouched in the back seat. Not a single soda missing. The driver's door hung open, but there were no drag marks in the dirt. No footprints leading away. No signs of a fight. Paul's wallet was still in the glove box. But his shoes? Gone. That detail haunted his family for years. Paul never walked barefoot outside. Even at the lake, he wore old sneakers because of the rocks. For 3 straight days, volunteers walked shoulder to shoulder along the shoreline. Others canoed across the water at dawn. Search dogs tracked his scent but kept losing it near the waterline. The whole community showed up. They found nothing. The case jumped from a missing person to presumed tragedy, and people built their own stories to fill the silence. Some whispered that Paul ran away. Others insisted he was taken. A few claimed he was mixed up in something he shouldn't have been. None of it matched his actual life. The pressure settled hardest on Linda. She kept Paul's room exactly the same: baseball posters on the wall, his school jacket draped over the chair, his alarm clock still set for a morning he never reached. Every year on the anniversary, she'd drive out to that rest stop and stand at the edge of the pull-in, staring at the spot where his car was found. She always asked the same question: if he left the lake alive, where did he go? Okay, I have to stop here for a second and ask you something. 36 years. That's how long Linda waited for an answer. 36 years of birthdays that never happened. Holidays with an empty seat at the table. Sleepless nights wondering what really happened to my son. Now, think about the people who buried this truth. The ones who let her suffer in silence while they knew what really happened. If that makes your blood boil? Good. It should. Here's what I need you to do: smash that like button right now. Not for me, for Paul. For Linda. For every family out there still waiting on answers that someone is sitting on. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this is your moment. We're building something here, a community that refuses to let these stories die. We're closing in on 1,000 subscribers, and I genuinely believe we can blow past that number if everyone watching right now just clicks that button. You're not just a viewer. You're part of this. You're choosing which side you're on, the side that buries the truth, or the side that demands it. All right. Let me show you who was really watching Paul that night. The photo does more than prove Paul was alive. It exposes a name the original investigation pushed aside, a man who watched those trails like they belonged to him and him alone. His name is William Tate. Back in Columbus, the cold case unit spreads Tate's maps across a conference table. Every page from that R88 box is laid out. Red circles mark the shoreline, the North Ridge, and pockets of woods regular visitors would never stumble into. These aren't day trip notes. These look like patrol zones. A detective pulls old park records and finds something unsettling. From 1984 to 1991, Alum Creek had a ranger with a pattern of behavioral complaints. Aggressive toward hikers. Slow to call in reports. Known for staying on duty long after his shift ended, sometimes hours passed when he should have gone home. The name on the personnel file, Tate, William H. The complaints paint a disturbing picture. One family reported that Tate stood at the tree line, watching their teenage son for nearly an hour without saying a single word. A hiker said Tate followed him in complete silence for half a mile through the woods. Nothing ever led to charges. Supervisors called him overzealous and told him to calm down. Then, after 1991, he vanished from all records. Now his maps are sitting on that table, recovered from a storage unit he rented years later. And the more the detectives study those red circles, the more a pattern emerges. One ring sits directly over the exact spot where Paul stands in that photograph. Another sits 7 miles from the water, on a wooded rise listed in old notes as Ridge 4. That ridge is significant. In 1999, hikers found bone fragments in a shallow pit on Ridge 4. The remains were never identified with the technology available at the time. Those samples go back to a lab, this time with modern DNA testing. Meanwhile, detectives drive out to Alum Creek with Tate's maps in hand. It's late afternoon. The park looks peaceful. Families fish near the dam. Kids skip rocks into the shallows. Same as it ever was. The team starts at the shoreline where the photograph placed Paul at 7:46 p.m. They study the angle of the shot. Look back toward the trees. Half hidden by brush, there's a narrow rise with a perfect view of the water, completely concealed from the main trail. It matches a small triangle sketched in the corner of Tate's map. Someone stood on that rise with a camera. Someone watched Paul without ever being seen. The detectives follow the map lines up the slope, into the trees, onto a faint path most visitors would never notice. They pass cut stumps, broken fence posts, crushed cans. This isn't a picnic area. This is where someone came on purpose. Near higher ground, they find a stump carved with initials and a date, WT86. Tate marked this spot 2 years before Paul disappeared. He wasn't just passing through. He treated this hill like it was his. From that spot, the path runs directly toward Ridge 4. The team logs every location, photographs the old trail blazes carved into trees, and compares each bend to Tate's drawings. For the first time, Paul's possible route stops being theory. It becomes terrifyingly real. Then the lab results come back. Mitochondrial DNA links those bone fragments from 1999 to Linda Renner's maternal line. There's no room for doubt. The remains belong to Paul. But that's not all. The report reveals blunt force trauma to the skull and clear signs the body was moved after death. The soil embedded in the remains doesn't match the shallow grave where he was found. It matches a different part of the forest, closer to the water. The meaning is brutal in its simplicity. Paul didn't die at the lake. He didn't die at the rest stop. He was struck somewhere in between, on ground William Tate walked more than anyone else alive. The detectives returned to the conference room. They placed 3 items side by side: the photograph of Paul at the lake, the map with Tate's red circles, the lab report linking the bones to Linda. Tate is dead. He'll never sit in a courtroom. There's no recorded confession. But the story his maps tell, the path that leads from the shore to Ridge, is almost impossible to deny. A wounded teenage boy stepped off the marked trail. A ranger who believed the woods belonged to him found that boy in his territory. Somewhere between the shoreline and Ridge 4, that encounter turned violent. For 36 years, Brookdale told itself Paul simply disappeared. The evidence says something far worse. He made it out of the water alive. He walked into someone's territory. And he never walked out. The case takes an even darker turn when a cold case clerk discovers a small notebook jammed between 2 old folders in the evidence room. The cover is worn. Edges curled from years of sweat and weather. 3 faded letters sit in the top corner: TWT. The detectives open it carefully. Inside are coordinates, cryptic warnings, and detailed notes about people Tate watched over the years. Some pages are lists of hikers he claimed crossed lines. Others describe paths he deliberately blocked with fallen branches so wanderers stay out. But one entry stands completely apart. The handwriting is darker, heavier. The pencil dug so deep into the paper it nearly tore through. It reads, "The injured boy entered restricted ground. Intervention required." The date beside it, July 18, 1988. That single sentence hits harder than the photograph ever could. It suggests Tate encountered Paul after the moment captured on film. It also suggests Tate believed, with absolute conviction, that he had the right to act. The right to decide what happened next. He wrote intervention the way someone might write a warning issued or assistance provided. But the lab report tells a very different story: a blunt strike, hard enough to end a life. The detectives need someone who knew Tate in real time, someone who worked beside him during those years. They tracked down Harold McCreary, a retired ranger living in Marion. He's older now. Shoulders rounded. Hands trembling. He agrees to speak but asks to keep the curtains closed. McCreary sits at his kitchen table and stares at the notebook placed in front of him. His eyes change the moment he recognizes Tate's handwriting. He nods slowly, like he's been waiting for this conversation for a very long time. "I knew he kept notes," McCreary says quietly. "But I didn't know he still had them." The detectives ask the question they came for: did Tate see Paul Renner that night? McCreary takes a long, heavy breath, the kind people take when they've held something inside for far too long. He explains that he and Tate often patrolled the area after hours, even when they weren't supposed to. Tate believed the woods needed protection. He believed teenagers caused trouble. He believed the rules were stronger than the people who broke them. On the night Paul disappeared, McCreary says Tate showed up at his house after dark. His shirt was filthy. His hands were shaking. He said there'd been a problem up on the ridge. According to Tate, he'd confronted a teenager who was injured and disoriented. The kid who wouldn't stop walking toward restricted ground. Tate claimed he tried to stop him. Said things got out of hand. McCreary pauses. His voice drops to almost a whisper. He told me the boy fell. I didn't want to believe anything worse. The detective leans forward. Did he ask for your help? McCreary swallows hard. He asked me to come with him. He said we needed to move the body before anyone found it. Said people would blame him even if it was just an accident. The room goes dead silent. McCreary admits he followed Tate into the woods that night. They reached a spot near Ridge for where Tate had already dragged Paul's body. McCreary says he didn't check for a pulse. Didn't question Tate's story. Didn't report anything. He helped bury the body because he was scared. Scared of losing his job. Scared of being implicated in something he didn't fully understand. The detectives press harder. Did you see the injury? He hesitates. There was blood on the left side of his head. I didn't see him breathing. I should have checked. I didn't. The investigators already know the truth. The soil inside Paul's skull came from a different part of the forest. Paul was struck in one location and moved to another. Tate's intervention was no accident. McCreary wipes his face with both hands. His voice cracks. I thought he was already gone. I swear I believed that. If I had known, if I had even tried, he can't finish. The detectives arrest Harold McCreary on charges of tampering with evidence, obstruction of justice, and abuse of a corpse. He doesn't resist. He nods slowly, like this moment should have come decades ago. Later that afternoon, officers drive to Brookdale and knock on Linda Renner's door. They show her the DNA confirmation. They walk her through everything, the photograph, the maps, the notebook, McCreary's confession. Linda listens without moving. When they finish, she places her hand gently over the photograph of Paul from 1987 and closes her eyes. So he was alive, she says softly. And he needed help. Her voice doesn't break. It simply settles into a truth she'd carried, without proof, for 36 years. The town of Brookdale finally knows what the official file never said out loud. Paul didn't walk away from Alum Creek by choice. He walked into a man who never should have worn a badge. Detectives return to Ridge for before sunrise. The air is cold, sharp enough to sting the inside of your nose. The light hasn't reached the forest floor yet. Their boots sink into soft soil where fresh tracks were found the week before. McCreary admitted during questioning that he came back here recently. He'd heard rumors the cold case was being reopened and needed to see if anything had changed. But the ground tells a different story. There are two sets of footprints in the clearing. One belongs to McCreary. The other is larger, deeper, fresher, less than 10 days old. Someone else walked this ridge after him. A detective crouches near a disturbed patch of earth. Leaves have been brushed aside in a deliberate straight line, not by wind, but by a hand. Nearby sits a crushed tobacco pouch. Tate smoked the same brand back in the 80s, but he's been dead for years. Whoever stood here came with purpose. The detectives cast a wide search grid and sweep the slope. They find 3 more small markers, a snapped twig, a cigarette filter, and a scuff in the dirt that points toward a narrow trail locals almost never use. None of it leads to a clear suspect. But it confirms one unsettling truth: this ridge never stopped being watched. When the team returns to Columbus, news of McCreary's arrest spreads through Brookdale like wildfire. The community splits. Some defend him out of old loyalty. He coached Little League, he was at every town picnic. How could he be involved in something like this? Others demand harsher charges. Reporters gather outside the precinct, asking the question everyone wants answered. Why did it take 36 years to uncover a truth that was sitting in a storage box the whole time? Inside a small briefing room, the lead detective reads the final case summary aloud. It states that Paul Renner died from blunt force trauma. That his body was moved to conceal the crime. That a park ranger who believed the forest belonged to him and him alone hid the truth for decades with the help of a coward who chose silence over justice. The report officially closes the case. It doesn't comfort anyone. Later that afternoon, Linda Renner makes a request. She asks to visit Ridge 4. 2 officers escort her up the trail. She moves slowly, steadily, taking in every detail of the path her son walked 36 years ago. When she reaches the clearing, she stops. The trees stand motionless around her. The air is still. She holds Paul's silver chain, the one recovered with his remains, and lets it rest in her open palm. He wasn't lost, she whispers. She looks toward the trail that leads back down to the water. He was trying to get home. Linda doesn't stay long. Grief has already taken too much from her. She turns away from the ridge with measured steps, not because she's found peace, but because she's finally found the truth she begged for every single year. That evening, detectives examine Tate's notebook one final time. On the very last page, at the very bottom, sits a single symbol. A circle. A short line. A question mark. Tate drew it as his final record of the night he crossed paths with Paul Renner. No one knows what it means. A second witness? A direction Paul tried to run? A mark of Tate's deteriorating mind? It's one last question that may never be answered. The lake is calm now. The ridge is quiet. But the truth sits between them, unchanged, undeniable. Paul Renner survived the water. He survived the trail. He didn't survive the man who believed he owned the woods. All right, I want to talk directly to you for a second. You just spent time with this story. You watched how a family waited 36 years while the truth sat rotting in a box. You saw how one man's silence let a killer go to his grave unpunished. Stories like this don't get solved because of luck. They get solved because people refuse to forget. So here's what I'm asking: if you believe Paul deserved better, share this video. Send it to someone who needs to hear it. Post it on your socials. Get it in front of people. Because somewhere out there, right now, there are other families still waiting for answers. Other cases collecting dust. Other truths being buried by people counting on the world to move on. Let's not let them win. Drop a comment below and tell me, what part of this case hit you the hardest? Was it the photograph? McCreary's confession? That moment Linda said he was trying to get home? I read every single comment, and I want to know what you're thinking. If you're not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? We're building a community here. Not just viewers, people who demand justice. We're closing in on 1,000 subscribers, and honestly, we can crush that number tonight if everyone watching takes 2 seconds to click that button. You've already proven which side you're on by making it this far. Now let's make sure Paul's story reaches every corner of the internet. I'll see you in the next one. The people who bury the truth are counting on you to scroll past. Don't give them what they want. Subscribe now.